I've never been the kind of guy who thought he'd be writing a story like this, but here I am. Maybe I just need to get it off my chest. Honestly, I don't even know where to start, but I'll try. It all began about a year ago. My wife, Lisa, and I had been together for 5 years. We'd been planning our wedding for months, picking out the venue, the flowers, the little details that make everything feel real. We'd saved for it, scraped together every dollar we could, dreaming of the day we'd finally say, "I do." I still remember how it felt, standing in the backyard on a clear summer evening, her hand in mine, feeling like we had the whole world ahead of us. That's why, when I found out what I did, it shattered everything I believed about us. It started about 2 weeks ago when I noticed something strange. I'd been working late a lot and Lisa was acting weird. Not just distracted, she was hiding her phone, brushing off questions, avoiding eye contact. Nothing obvious, but the way she'd flinch every time I got close to her phone, that nervous twitch in her fingers, wasn't normal. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was stressed at work or just caught up in something. But then her phone buzzed one night while she was in the shower. I didn't mean to snoop, but I couldn't help it. I took a quick peek at the screen. What I saw turned my stomach. There were messages, flirty, suggestive messages between her and her boss, a guy named Mark. It was obvious it wasn't just work talk. They'd been planning meetups, exchanging photos, and worst of all, talking about money. About how she needed more and how they were going to be set soon. My heart started pounding. I felt like I was punched in the gut. How long had this been going on? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the messages, trying to find some sense of normalcy in the chaos. The next morning, I decided to do some digging. I knew her well enough to know she'd hide things where I wouldn't find them easily, but I was determined. I followed her one day when she left for work, and I saw her go into an apartment building I'd never seen before. The windows were dark, and I noticed her park her car behind the building near a side alley. That's when I saw it. She was meeting someone there, someone who wasn't me. I parked a block away, heart pounding in my chest, and watched through a crack in the curtains. She was meeting Mark, there was no doubt. She handed him a small envelope and they exchanged a quick kiss. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched again. She'd been lying all along. I knew then that the messages weren't just words. They represented a betrayal beyond anything I could have imagined. And that apartment, that was her secret hideaway, a place I'd never even suspected. I went home that night with a head full of rage and confusion. I felt like a fool. How could she do this? How could she hide it so well? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind. That's when it hit me. I could no longer trust her. Not her words, not her promises. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together, trying to find a way out of this mess. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I needed to do something. I couldn't just walk away after all this. I had to make her pay somehow. And that's where I'm at now, planning my next move. I've got the evidence, I've got the anger, and I've got a plan. It's petty maybe, but it's what I need to feel like I have some control. I started devising a scheme to turn her own game against her. I'm not just going to confront her blind with tears or accusations. I want her to see I'm onto her, that I know everything. She's been so confident, so smug, and I won't let her get away with it. Right now, I'm waiting for her to come home. I want her to see me calm, collected, but with that cold fury simmering just beneath the surface. I want her to realize that I've caught her, and I won't be deceived anymore. I won't trust the same way again, not after discovering her deception. This is just the beginning, and I'm already feeling the weight of what's coming next. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone I had secretly taken from her purse earlier that day. I kept my eyes fixed on the screen, feeling my palms sweat and my stomach twist into knots. Every detail, every message, every flicker of her words cut deep. It was like watching her betray me all over again, but this time I was the one holding the evidence. I couldn't believe I'd missed the signs for so long. All those little things, her secretive texts, the late nights, the way she'd always be on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, sudden bursts of nervousness that I'd brushed off as her being overwhelmed. Now I saw it differently. She'd been hiding a whole other life. And that apartment, that wasn't just her escape spot, it was her sanctuary for someone else, someone who wasn't me. My mind raced with possibilities. I knew I couldn't just confront her blindly. I had to be smart. I needed leverage, something that would make her realize I wasn't going to be ignored anymore. I wanted her to see that I knew that I wasn't going to sit quietly and pretend everything was fine. I decided that I'd use her secret against her in a way she'd never expect. I'd find a way to turn her own game around, make her realize she'd crossed a line she couldn't come back from. As I sat there, I remembered the nights she'd been especially distant, how she'd brush off my questions, how she'd suddenly vanish into her office or the bathroom when I got too close. It all clicked now. She'd been hiding her affair from the start. I felt that familiar, icy anger build up. My fists clenched. I had to do something, and I had to do it fast. The plan started forming in my head. I'd make her think I was completely clueless, but secretly, I'd be collecting everything I needed. I'd even set up a little trap to catch her in the act if she slipped up again. I wanted her to see that I wasn't as naive as she thought. I wanted her to realize I was onto her, that I knew everything, and that I wasn't going to be a pawn in her game anymore. I looked around the room, feeling a strange sense of calm mixed with raw hostility. I knew that once I executed what I had in mind, nothing would be the same. I had to break her trust completely, make her see that I was no longer the naive fool she thought I was. That would be my revenge, stripping away her facade, exposing her lies, and forcing her to face the consequences of her actions. I kept the phone hidden in my pocket, my eyes still glued to the screen. I needed to plan the next move carefully. The evidence was damning, but I knew she'd try to cover her tracks. I had to outsmart her. I had to be one step ahead. Suddenly, the door creaked open. I snapped back to reality, heart pounding. She stepped inside, whistling softly as if nothing had happened. I forced a smile, trying to hide the storm inside me. "Hey, honey," she said, dropping her bag on the table. "Did you miss me?" I looked her straight in the eyes, feeling every ounce of my fury boiling just beneath the surface. I took a slow breath, then said, "Yeah, I missed you, but I think we need to talk." Her smile faltered just a little. She sensed it. Whatever she thought she was about to say, it would have to wait. I had plans now. Big plans, and she was about to regret every moment of this betrayal. This was just the beginning. That night after she fell asleep, her breathing slow and steady, unaware of the storm inside me, I stayed awake, plotting every step of my revenge. I had the evidence now, all the messages, the secret meetings, the hidden apartment. But I didn't want to just confront her blindly. I needed to make her realize that I knew everything without even saying a word. I wanted her to see her world unravel, to understand that her lies were exposed and I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt. I'd set a trap. I'd leave something behind, something that would make her panic, something that would let her know I'd been watching her, waiting. Maybe it would be a fake message, a fabricated piece of evidence, something to make her think I'd discovered even more than I had. I'd make her believe I was in control. That was the key, control. Over the next few days, every moment became a calculated move. I started by cleaning out her purse, careful not to leave a trace, and slipping in a fake message I'd crafted. Something suggestive, enough to make her think I'd found even more proof of her infidelity. I also planted a small recording device in her car, just in case she slipped up further. All the while, I kept my calm, hiding my fury behind a facade of quiet determination. Then came the day I planned to confront her directly. I made sure I was home when she arrived, early, with everything prepared. My palms were sweaty, but I kept my voice even. I wanted her to see that I was serious, that I knew. When she walked in, she was surprised to see me sitting on the couch, calm but rigid. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't read. Guilt, fear, good, that's exactly what I wanted. "So I've been doing some thinking," I started, voice steady, "and I found out about the apartment, about Mark, about everything, and I want to know what the hell is going on." Her face went pale. She looked like she was about to speak, but I cut her off. "You've been lying to my face for months. While we were saving for our future, you were funneling money into a secret apartment. You've been meeting him there, haven't you?" She tried to deny it, but I shook my head. I pulled out my phone, showing her the fake message I'd planted. Her eyes widened in horror. "You see, I knew something was off. I've been watching, listening, and I even set a little trap." I paused, watching her squirm. "And what I found out is enough to tear everything apart. You've been cheating, lying, and spending our savings on a man who isn't me." Her voice broke as she whispered, "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I snapped. "You thought you could hide this forever, but I know the truth now, and I'm not the kind of guy who forgives betrayal that deep." She looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't done. I leaned in, voice cold. "You're about to lose everything, your job, your apartment, your marriage, because I'm done. I don't trust you anymore, and I don't want to see you again after today." She burst into tears then, trying to plead, but I had already made up my mind. I told her to pack her things, handed her the keys to her apartment, her little haven, with her lover, and walked out of the door, leaving her sobbing behind. I felt a strange mix of relief and fury. That was my revenge. I took her lies, turned them against her, and made her see that I was no longer the naive fool she thought I was. I was done being played. As I drove away, I looked in the mirror and thought about everything. Trust was broken, yes, but now I was free. Free from her lies, free from her betrayal. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be fallout, tears, and maybe regret, but I'd reclaimed some part of myself. And that's what mattered. I'd finally had enough of her games. From now on, I'd focus on rebuilding, on trusting myself again. Because if I learned anything, it's that sometimes you have to cut out the poison to truly heal. The silence in my apartment was deafening after I left her. The echoes of her sobs still haunted me, but honestly, I felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally done what I'd been dreaming about, confronting her, revealing her lies, and making her face the consequences. When I walked out that door, I felt like I'd shed a burden I didn't even realize I'd been carrying for months. But the truth is, I knew this wasn't the end. Her reactions, her crying, her begging, they were just the surface. I was already thinking about what came next. The fallout, the aftermath, the long road to healing. I'd been betrayed, yeah, but now I was free from her grip. I could finally breathe again, even if part of me still felt raw, like an open wound. The next few days were a blur. I stayed busy, moving through the motions, but in my head I kept replaying everything. Did I do the right thing? Could I have handled it differently? The honest answer was no, I couldn't, not anymore. She'd pushed me to the edge, and I finally snapped. I can't lie, I still felt the sting of betrayal, but I also felt something else, power, that I'd taken control of my life again. I knew she'd try to reach out. I'd gotten a few texts, pleading, crying, begging for forgiveness. I didn't answer. I needed her to understand that manipulations and lies had consequences. I had to stand firm, even if it hurt. One thing I did do was reach out to a lawyer. I figured I'd need to protect myself legally if she decided to come back and cause trouble. I also started gathering all the evidence, screenshots, messages, the fake evidence I planted. I wanted to be prepared. I didn't trust her to just walk away quietly. It was around this time I realized I'd been so consumed by her betrayal that I'd forgotten about myself. I was exhausted, mentally, emotionally. So I decided to take a step back, focus on myself. Go for walks, clear my head. That's when I really started feeling the weight of what I'd lost, not just the trust, but the future I'd planned with her. One evening I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset turn the sky a fiery orange. The cool breeze brushed against my face, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. I finally admitted to myself that I was done waiting for her to change. She had made her choice, and I had to accept it. I also realized that I'd been so fixated on revenge that I'd neglected to think about what I really wanted: peace, honesty, and a fresh start. That meant cutting ties completely. No more maybe someday or let's see what happens. I was moving on for good. And so I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the setting sun, and made a decision. I'd start by handing over her keys, officially ending whatever was left of our life together. I found a box, packed her belongings, and wrote a simple note. "Consider this your final goodbye. I hope you find what you're looking for." As I handed her the keys, I felt a strange mix of relief and resolve. It was a decisive moment, one that marked the end of her lies and the beginning of my rebuilding. I knew I'd face loneliness, heartbreak, and plenty of questions, but I also knew I'd come out stronger. Looking back, I wish I could say I had some perfect advice to give, but honestly, trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. The only thing I can say for sure is, don't ignore the red flags. When you see them, address them immediately. And when someone shows you who they are, believe them. because sometimes ending things is the only way to save yourself. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I was doing my best to keep busy, but beneath it all, I was still putting the pieces of my shattered trust back together. I kept replaying everything, the look she gave, her nervous fidgeting, that secret apartment, the messages. It all kept creeping back into my mind, gnawing at me. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. One thing I knew, though, I couldn't let her have that power over me anymore. Not after everything. I'd made my move, cut her loose, and now I had to figure out how to start healing, really healing from the mess she'd created. I didn't want to carry this bitterness forever, but I also knew I couldn't just pretend it didn't hurt. I started talking to a counselor, not because I thought I was crazy, because I wasn't, but because I needed someone to help me process what had happened. I told her everything, from the first red flag to the final confrontation. She listened carefully, then asked me a simple question. What do you want for yourself now? That question stuck with me. I realized I'd been so busy fighting to find answers and exact revenge that I'd ignored my own needs. I needed to reclaim my sense of self, trust myself again, rebuild my confidence. The betrayal had made me question everything, even my own instincts. That scared me more than anything. So I made a commitment, no more rushing into decisions, no more ignoring my gut. I'd take it slow, piece by piece. I started working out again, walking in nature, reconnecting with old friends I'd drifted from. I wanted to remember who I was before all this chaos, before she shattered what we had. It was during one of those walks that I saw a couple holding hands, laughing as they crossed the street. Something about their ease, their trust, struck me. I realized I'd lost that feeling, trust not just in her but in myself. I'd let her distort my view of what was real. And no matter how much I wanted revenge or closure, I knew I had to rebuild my trust gradually. It wasn't going to happen overnight. One night I sat with a glass of whiskey, staring at the city lights. My mind flashed back to the day I found her with that envelope, the secret apartment, the fake message I planted. How I'd felt rage, betrayal, heartbreak all at once. But then I remembered how light I felt when I finally handed her the keys and walked away. That moment, decisive, final, had given me some kind of relief I'd never experienced before. I realized that my power wasn't in revenge alone. It was in reclaiming my life, in choosing to let go of her hold over me, no matter how tempting it was to dwell on what I lost. I had to accept that I'd been hurt, yes, but I was also free. Free to start fresh, free to trust again, even if it was shaky at first. In the end, I learned something vital. Trust is fragile, but it can be rebuilt, slowly, painfully, but surely. You just have to be willing to do the work. And sometimes, ending a toxic chapter is the best gift you can give yourself. Because if I've learned anything from this, it's that nobody is worth losing yourself over, not even someone you once loved. The final act of all this might sound simple, but it was anything but easy. After weeks of reflection and healing, I knew what I had to do. I had to make a clean break, completely and irrevocably. No more lingering doubts, no more second-guessing myself. I needed closure that came from taking decisive action. One Saturday morning, I got everything ready. I packed up her belongings, those items she left behind in her rush to escape, and put them in a box. I wanted her to know I was serious. I even included a note. This is the end. Don't try to contact me. I'm moving forward. It was blunt but honest. I was finally reclaiming my space, my life, my peace. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift just a little. Then I drove to her apartment, her secret apartment where she'd been meeting Mark. I walked up to the door, my hands trembling slightly but my mind clear. I inserted the key she'd given me when we first got married, turned it, and pushed the door open. Inside, everything looked as she'd left it. Her clothes, her makeup, her little trinkets, all untouched. I took a moment to really look around, then grabbed the box with her things. I placed it on the kitchen counter and took one last look at the apartment that had been her hideout, her escape, her betrayal. Then I called the number she'd given me when we were married, her parents. I told them everything. How she'd lied, how she'd deceived me, and that I was done. I explained I was returning her belongings, and I politely asked them to pass on the message that she was no longer part of my life. Next, I took her keys, her phone, and her fake evidence, and I made one final act of closure. I drove to the local police station, handed everything over, and filed a no-contact order. I wanted to make sure she couldn't come back, couldn't manipulate me anymore. I told the officer I just needed to move on, that I didn't want her near me or my new life. Standing there in that sterile room, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was tangible, the kind that settles deep into your bones when you finally cut ties with someone who's caused you so much pain. I knew I wasn't completely healed, but I had taken the first real step. I was free from her shadow. I was free from the lies. As I walked out of the station, I looked back one last time. My chest felt lighter, my mind finally clear. The betrayal still stung, but I knew I wouldn't let it define me. I'd learned a hard lesson about trust, about red flags, and about the importance of listening to my instincts. The last thing I did was close a chapter I never wanted to open in the first place. I handed over her belongings, cut the last ties, and started to rebuild. It's been a tough road, and I know there will be days when I question everything again. But I also know I'm stronger for it. The takeaway: trust your gut. Don't ignore the signs. And when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Because in the end, your life is too precious to waste on lies and betrayal. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away and start over.